News First, Newsline with Faraz Shaukatali.
Hello there and a very good morning. It's the 29th of December 2015. You're joining us live here on MTV on Newsline. I'm Sonali Waniga-Badage. Our discussion this morning will revolve around the concept and the catchphrase human rights. Now what are human rights? If we take a basic definition, human rights are those rights which are inherently given to all human beings regardless of gender, sexual orientation, nationality, place of birth. How are human rights protected in Sri Lanka? Well, let me tell you there are several ways. Our guest will elaborate further. But initially, let me tell you the Constitution of 1978, which is the supreme document that governs Sri Lanka. There is a fundamental rights chapter where the freedom of thought and expression, conscience, the right to be treated equally, all of that is governed. Where does the Human Rights Commission of Sri Lanka feature in this formula of protecting human rights? To tell us this and more, we are joined by our guest in our studios here this morning. She is Ambika Satkunathan, a Commissioner of the Human Rights Commission of Sri Lanka. Good morning to you, and thanks for joining us.
No problem.
Firstly, if we could break it down for the benefit of our viewers, and right now I think we have a cross-section of viewers because we're on school holiday as well. When can a person seek the assistance of the Human Rights Commission of Sri Lanka?
A person can seek the assistance of the Human Rights Commission of Sri Lanka when or if their rights have been violated by executive or administrative action. So this means that the action would be by a state entity or a government entity. So for instance, if there is a private dispute, let's say there is a private property dispute or perhaps there is a family dispute, then those are not complaints that can be made to the Human Rights Commission.
With the advent of the 19th Amendment to the Constitution, several independent commissions were appointed. Can you talk a bit about those as well?
Of course. As you rightly said, with the 19th Amendment, other commissions, like for instance, we have the Police Commission, we have the Public Services Commission, and the Bribery Commission. And I think that it is important to also view all these commissions, well, not perhaps as part of a package, but as also interlinked, in that their work often has an impact on each other. I'll give you an example. For instance, at the Human Rights Commission, we receive many complaints that perhaps should go to the Public Services Commission because it is about a grievance that a public servant has in relation to perhaps their promotion or an increment. So therefore, instead of complaining to the Human Rights Commission, the more appropriate body to complain to would be the Public Services Commission. Or let's say there is a police officer who once again has similar problems, they would be better placed submitting a complaint to the Police Commission, because at the Human Rights Commission we have received in the past many such complaints which are better handled by these other commissions.
Right. At the moment, is there a backlog of complaints received at the HRCSL?
I mean, we do have a bit of backlog, and that might also be because we do receive many complaints that don't always fall within our mandate, like I said, these kind of private issues, and also because complaints that should be sent to the other commissions are sent to us. So what we shall be doing is putting in place a system where we shall start referring these complaints to the appropriate commissions.
Right. So at the moment, what you're saying is that there is no mechanism to sort of create awareness among the general public about which forums they can go to or fora they could go to for a particular grievance.
Exactly. It is
so that procedure needs to be streamlined.
Exactly.
Also, what is the procedure involved when a person comes to the Human Rights Commission and makes a complaint? What happens from there?
When a person comes to the Human Rights Commission and makes a complaint, their complaint would be registered and they would be given an acknowledgement slip. Right. And then, of course, the Commission would see whether the complaint falls within the Commission's mandate. And if they find that it does fall within the mandate, then of course we would call the parties for an initial inquiry.
Right.
But of course before that we would also try to get as much information as possible on the case, because if not, what would happen is when you call someone for an inquiry, you find that there are documents that might be missing.
Right.
And then you have to, that is also another way in which perhaps the inquiry process drags on. And then of course after we inquire into the matter, then we would issue a recommendation. Because what you have to understand is that the Human Rights Commission cannot issue orders. So this, what we issue are recommendations. Hence, state entities to whom these recommendations are issued will have to respect the mandate and powers of the Commission and implement these recommendations. Because unfortunately what we have found in the past is that a number of state institutions do not actually implement the recommendation. So non-implementation of recommendation is also something I think that contributes to a lack of respect for the protection and promotion of human rights.
If the non-implementation of these recommendations given by the Human Rights Commission is what has been taking place, what do you propose to do to sort of overcome this situation? Does the Act have to be amended? What do you think about that?
I mean, you are very correct in that, yes, perhaps we need to have a conversation about amending the Act to try and find a way of ensuring that the recommendations of the Commission are implemented. That is one way. And the second way would be also, what is, traditionally known in the human rights discourse and activism as naming and shaming.
Right.
Where if there is a repeat offender, for instance, an
Right.
institution that repeatedly does not respect the recommendations, then perhaps at the end of the year, then you would have this, way of making that public. And the third thing would be also to create a culture of human rights, where we don't have to use these perhaps more coercive methods to make people abide by the recommendations, where there is a respect for human rights and these state institutions realize the importance and the need to implement the recommendations of the Human Rights Commission. So these are the three ways in which we could perhaps try to strengthen.
Okay. Apart from this, there has been an increase in the instances of violence perpetrated against women and children are concerned. In your opinion, how can we go about resolving this, which is a huge social issue?
We have found that there have been many more reports of violence against women and children, but of course we don't know whether this is actually an increase or whether there is increased reporting.
Right.
Because also, for instance, many civil society organizations have for the past, many decades, 2 decades, been, they've had many awareness-raising programs
Right.
on sexual and gender-based violence. So it could possibly be that there is more reporting
right.
because of it. But if you look at the reason for violence against women, I think we come back to the issue of gender inequality and patriarchy. The fact that women are not looked upon as equal citizens. The fact that socially it is thought that it is acceptable to, for instance, perpetrate domestic violence. So these are also kind of more the deep-rooted causes that we have to tackle. All the while, we also should try to ensure that existing laws are implemented, that there are other protection and support mechanisms. Like, for instance, if there is a woman suffering domestic violence, then we have shelters to which she can go, and we have free legal aid to help her. That if she is not economically independent, that
Right.
we have programs to actually help her earn a livelihood, because sometimes women also don't leave situations of violence because of economic reasons.
Right, yes. But what I've seen is we always talk about this. There is always a discourse happening about violence against women, violence against children. But although we come up with fabulous proposals, nothing really is implemented. But what we need to do is implement. And why isn't this being done?
I couldn't agree more. I think if you look at Sri Lanka, it perhaps has many positive laws, and we have many public institutions that are supposed to protect people's rights and provide support. Non-implementation, I think, is a problem that is common to the laws, common to respecting, as I said, the recommendations of the Human Rights Commission. So I think, well, two ways. One, of course, is once again it's about respect also for the rule of law. Right? Respect for the rule of law, where people cannot and do not enjoy impunity. So where someone knows, if I do violate the law, if I break the law, then there are consequences for it. Because I think impunity generally in society also fosters impunity even within the family. So whether it's at the highest level to the lowest level, you find people think they can just get away with it.
Right.
And that, I think, is also creates more space for violations. And then, of course, then that is what leads to also non-implementation, because people think, oh, it's just the order of the Human Rights Commission. Why do we need to implement it? Even if I don't, nothing is going to happen. So, and there is, in that sense, no respect for the law, or fear that the law will actually impose a penalty on the violator or the perpetrator.
So, looking forward, do you think that we as Sri Lankans, that we would react better, or we would respond better if there are punitive sanctions, or if we are in fear of the law?
Well, I think more than fear of the law, we need to respect the law. And that, I think, is lacking. And we have to respect the law because we see the inherent value in that. We see the value because, for instance, we believe that if someone violates my rights, that I will be able to go and obtain redress somewhere. I can get a solution. And that is the need to respect law, because what we must realize, if when we violate the law, well, someone else can do the same. And that just leads to, in a way, collective mass impunity. And then there is no law and order. So I think we must understand the inherent value of respecting the law, because only then can you have a society in which there is order and in which everyone's rights are respected.
What is the role that men can play in ensuring the protection of women?
I think men can actually play a very important role, because I think perhaps in the past the mistake that we have made is when we have these awareness raising programs, we target only women. So, we go and tell women, okay, these are your rights, now go claim them. And, you do not have to be subjected to violence. But we did not also then focus on the people who might perhaps be perpetrating the violence, the men in the family or the society. But I think even civil society organizations have learned. So now you find they include men in these awareness-raising programs, and to also, I think, from a very young age, even in schools, because school curriculum is so important. I think it's important to teach human rights in schools and to make children understand that, men and women are equal, and to kind of break these myths and stereotypes, from the simple things of giving pink clothes and toys, dolls to girls, to about the subjects which they can study. Yes, you can go on to be an engineer, you can be a truck driver, whatever.
Yeah.
So all those myths and stereotypes that we encounter from the time you're a baby to all the way to an adult. So I think the role of men is very important, and the role of education also is very important.
So you encourage a reform of the education system, in that you say that human rights should be
part of the curriculum.
Exactly, human rights should be added into the curriculum, and that gender stereotyping and other myths should be done away with.
Definitely, I think so. And I think there are attempts, to kind of include rights, and there have been some attempts, but I think we must adopt a more comprehensive and holistic approach rather than an ad hoc approach. And this would also then mean, you focus on the curriculum, then you also have kind of additional strengthening the skills and abilities of the teachers, and ensuring that the education system itself is strengthened, so they can also contribute to this kind of national dialogue that we have, and national, in a way, attempt to protect and promote human rights.
And one thing I think that we can't ignore when we talk about education is sex education, which is almost absent from school curriculums. And this is something that needs to be brought in ASAP. What are your thoughts on it?
Well, I think it is, as you say, an important aspect, and I think it is important to educate young people. Because not educating young people about this, or there are stigmas and taboos about even talking about sex education. And I think it is, for instance, already it exists in the curriculum, but you find in many schools, I think they don't even teach it, they gloss over it, or maybe.
In fact, the teachers, most of the instances that we've heard are where teachers themselves are too embarrassed to
talk about it. So there are lots of stigmas and taboos, which I think also is what creates space for also many violations, because you can't talk about these things. Even if, for instance, a girl child is getting abused, she feels a sense of shame. Even sexual and gender-based violence, there is a sense of shame about the human body, about these kind of natural processes that we go through. So I think it is very important to kind of normalize this, as it were. I don't know whether that's the correct word, but to have a more open conversation.
We are in conversation with Ambika Satkunanathan. We'll be right back after this short commercial break. Welcome back to Newsline. We're in conversation with Ambika Satkunanathan. She is a commissioner of the Human Rights Commission of Sri Lanka. Ambika, I'd like to change the direction of the conversation. You've researched extensively on transitional justice, militarization, gender. In post-conflict Sri Lanka, where would you say our reconciliation process is?
Well, that is a slightly difficult question. I think we are in the process of finding our feet, as it were, where the reconciliation process or the transitional justice process is concerned, because there was a resolution in Geneva, a joint resolution that Sri Lanka also co-sponsored, and there are certain elements to it. And from what we can see, the government is figuring out the actions that need to be taken to implement that, and also to put in place a transitional justice mechanism that addresses the concerns and of the people. So as of now, I think it's also a bit difficult to assess, because we don't know exactly what is being proposed. I mean, we have vague ideas and statements, etc., from different actors in the government. So until we know that, I think it's a bit difficult to assess.
When it comes to the North and East, and those who have directly suffered as a result of the conflict, do you think sufficient psychosocial support has been provided? For example, counseling?
Actually, no. A lot more needs to be done where the conflict-affected North and the East are concerned. Like, for instance, if we take women-headed households. In Sri Lanka, we have 1.2 million women-headed households, that is all over the country, of which about more than 58,000 are in the conflict-affected areas. So these women also have economic needs, livelihoods, and many of them actually don't have the ability to earn a decent kind of a living wage. So that is a problem. When that is a problem, you also find that their access to education and healthcare might also be limited, particularly the access to education of girl children. And of course, it is a society that has been deeply affected by the war. There is a lot of trauma there. So I think a lot more needs to be done to address that, because right now what we see is that there are a few institutions, a few civil society organizations that provide these services, but we need to do it in a far more kind of comprehensive, holistic manner.
Okay. Also, women's participation in the political sphere, is it dismal? What is your opinion?
Sadly, it is dismal. Because in Sri Lanka, what we have found is that women have, the political participation of women has been quite active. Because even if you look at political parties, at the grassroots, at the community level, women are quite active. But when it comes to political representation, the situation is quite dismal. Because, you know, right now I think we have 4.8%. That is 13 out of 225 members are women.
Right.
And now you compare that to India, which has 10.9%. You have Bangladesh with 19.7% and Nepal with 33.2%.
And Canada with 50%.
And we are actually, I think, one of the lowest. And that is also because, I mean, it's due to many reasons. One is that within the party structures also you find women are not in decision-making positions. So this means when it comes to giving nominations, then of course many women are not given nominations, because also they're not looked upon as winnable candidates. So, you know, if we put her, she's not actually going to win. Then there is the issue of funding. Many women don't have access to the millions and millions of rupees that you need to undertake a campaign. Then there is the issue of violence that also might restrict some women. And then once again, what we talked about earlier, these myths and stereotypes, like politics is not really suitable. So many women who might want to go might also be restricted due to, you know, social norms and families, etc. So I think, yes, a lot more needs to be done at multiple levels, whether it be, you know, quotas, whether it be political parties making a concerted effort to include women in decision-making positions, and also just generally in society. There's a need to recognize that it's very important for women also to be part of, you know, national decision-making processes.
Right. Talking about the North and East, now that we are in the post-conflict era, some of the negative aspects that we had culturally, for example, dowry issues, the caste problem, these are surfacing again. What's the ground situation like?
Well, some of these kind of, what we have to understand is that the conflict actually opened up spaces for women, for groups, you know, social groups that were previously marginalized, because the chaos of conflict actually resulted in many of these social norms being broken down during that time, and therefore opened up spaces. But now I suppose what you see here is what you see in even other parts of the world, you know, in a post-war phase,
right,
where you find that, you know, when you rebuild and post-war, you find that perhaps some of these regressive social norms also come into play. So there have also been kind of certain kind of mini studies conducted, and I think there are people doing postgrad studies. They publish their work, which says that caste is becoming an issue. And I think it is also an issue if you look at, for instance, the IDPs.
Right.
Because many of the people who still remain in the camps, let's say the welfare centers in the north, are those who might be from these marginalized social groups, because they also don't have the economic means. So they couldn't leave the conflict-affected areas, they couldn't leave the country, they don't have the means to rent a house, and they don't have family with whom they can perhaps stay. So those are the people who are also in the camps. So you see that intersection between social discrimination and also socio-economic factors and marginalization.
How can we bring about some kind of a livelihood development for mainly women-headed households, especially in areas like the North and East?
Well, I mean, livelihood generation is not exactly my area of expertise, but in working with women, what we find is that, you know, in the post-war phase, most of the programs had been kind of ad hoc, and also not with kind of a long-term vision. So for instance, if you are giving these women, you might give them goats or you might give them chickens, but that does not actually ensure long-term sustainability. And what I have found is that many people also prefer kind of what is it called, kind of paid employment, wage employment. So they might not be interested due to many factors in self-employment.
Right.
But most of the programs are all about self-employment, and that too at a very kind of micro level. So they have no access to markets. They might not have access to transport, and so they don't know how to market their goods, right? And sometimes you find the training that is given to women is also very sex stereotyped. So for instance, women are trained in sewing or
Right.
beauty culture, beauty parlor, but in a small village, how many seamstresses do you actually need?
Right.
And how many beauty parlors would you need? So I think we need to be a little more imaginative in also the kind of vocational training that we provide, and ensure that there are also job opportunities as well for these women.
Okay. Another issue that I'd like to address with you is the number of women, Sri Lankan women, suffering in the Middle East. There is no proper procedure to ensure that they are brought back to the country when they suffer all sorts of grievances. How do you think a reform process of this mechanism can be done, in your opinion?
I think reform is necessary, but also when we undertake reforms, we must ensure that we do not also violate the rights of women. So for instance, taking a very protectionist view and saying, women cannot go to the Middle East. Or finding ways of controlling that. What we need to do is we have to respect that they have, freedom of movement, and also to ensure that we have economic opportunities for them here, right? And then also I think we need to have stronger agreements with the countries to which these women are sent. We need to have better ways of centers in our embassies in these countries, and perhaps increased human resources, increased funding for them, so that when someone is in trouble they are also able to respond immediately. So I think once again an ad hoc approach is not going to work.
Right. One of my final questions to you. You will be functioning in the capacity of a Human Rights Commissioner for the HRCSL for a 3-year term.
That's right.
How do you propose to revolutionize human rights protection in Sri Lanka? Because I think it would be correct to say that it has been at a very lackadaisical pace. Your thoughts?
Well, okay, I think what we would hope to do and what we wish to do is to ensure that we don't perhaps have to use terms like revolutionize, that human rights would become, that it's something normal, that people respect the rule of law, that they respect human rights, and so we don't have to talk about revolutionize, human rights.
Right.
And to embed that within society, within the way that state structures function. I think that is something that we hope to do, and hopefully we're successful to some extent.
So practically how?
Practically how would be, for instance, for the Human Rights Commission to be vocal. When there are violations, we are vocal. We advise the government. We make recommendations to the government. We also work very closely with civil society on issues. And we also increase public awareness on these issues. So these are just some of the ways in which practically we hope to, implement this.
All right. Thank you very much. That was, of course, Ambika Satyananathan, Commissioner of the Human Rights Commission of Sri Lanka, joining us this morning on Newsline. With that, we wrap up this edition of Newsline. We'll see you again, same place, same time, tomorrow.
News First, Newsline with Faraz Shaukatali.